Buenas and half a day. The Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research and Planning is calling this public hearing to order. The time is now 9:02 a.m., Thursday, February 15th, 2024. In compliance with open government law, notices of today's hearing were broadcasted through KUAM, published on the Guam Daily Post, and provided via email to senators, stakeholders, and the local media, and posted to the Government of Guam public notice website. On Thursday, February 8th, for the 5-day notice, and Tuesday, February 6th, for the 48-hour notice. The purpose of today's hearing is to discuss the following agenda items: to hear testimony on Bill 119-37 COR, sponsored by Senator Sabina, Flores, Perez, and Senator Chris Barnett. It's an act to repeal Article 14 of Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, and to add a new Part G of Article 2 of Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to revitalizing the Guam Procurement Advisory Council to modernize procurement in order to promote public confidence and achieve the best value and service to our community. The next item is Bill 189-37 COR, sponsored by Senator Amanda L. Shelton, co-sponsored by Senators Roy A.B. Quinata, Dwayne T.D. Nicolas, Jesse A. Lujan. It's an act to add a new Section 5014 to Subarticle A of Article 1, to repeal Section 5001D of Subarticle A, Article 1, and to repeal Section 5217 of Subarticle B of Article 3, all of Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the Government of Guam's procurement policy in favor of individuals with disabilities. The third item on the agenda is Bill number 206-37 LS, sponsored by Senator William A. Parkinson. It's an act to add a new Section 8113.16 to Article 1 of Chapter 8, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to providing temporary emergency power capacity. And the fourth item and last item of the agenda is Bill number 237-37 COR, sponsored by Senator Sabina, Flores, Perez. Is an act to amend Section 5150 of Subarticle F, Article 2, Chapter 5, Division 1, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to updating the duties of the Attorney General by increasing the threshold for procurement oversight and advisement to $1 million or more. The rules of conduct are as follows. Those called to testify will be in order, beginning with the government agencies, followed by those that confirmed ahead of time by February 12th, and then followed by those that have signed up on the sign-in sheet. Those providing oral testimony will first be recognized by the chair before speaking, and please state your name, your organization, and position if relevant for record-keeping purposes. Senators will be given an opportunity at the end of each panel to ask questions. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to character or motive of any senator or individual testifying is not permitted. So now to begin our agenda. To hear testimony on Bill 119-37, sponsored by Senator Sabina Flores Perez and Senator Chris Barnett. It's an act to repeal Article 14, Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, and to add a new Part G of Article 2 of Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to revitalizing the Guam Procurement Advisory Council to modernize procurement in order to promote public confidence and achieve best value and service to our community. And so here are some opening remarks. Bill 119-37 aims to revitalize the Guam Procurement Advisory Council in order to modernize and institutionalize best practices in procurement throughout the government in order to promote public confidence and achieve best value in service to our community. Bill 119 proposes to change membership to those who statutorily and operationally play key roles in government procurement and who can develop policies and recommendations outlined in Section 5902 on a continuous basis. Some of the duties currently are to review the legal infrastructure of the government procurement system and to ensure uniformity of law, regulation, practice, to propose recommendations for the improvement, streamlining, and modernization, and the use of best value and performance-based methods as the basis for evaluation of government procurement activities, to make recommendations and identify methods to address new industries and technologies and financial systems while maintaining the general principles of procurement law. Bill 119-37 proposes to add other duties such as to assist in developing best practices and standard operating procedures for planned procurement, writing specs, market research, solicitation, drafting, and managing contracts, maintenance of procurement records, and other aspects of the procurement process. To make recommendations for training and/or certification of procurement professionals, including but not limited to developing and updating curriculum, developing online training, the trainer programs, establishing a Guam Procurement Institute for the training and education of public-private sector participants in government contracting. To make recommendations for implementing green procurement within the government of Guam under the advisement of the Guam Energy Office, the Guam Power Authority, Guam Environmental Protection Agency, University of Guam Center for Island Sustainability, and other government of Guam entities, and to make recommendations for maximizing federal funds in accordance with the Guam Procurement Law. The current statute mandated the final report of the Procurement Advisory Council was to be submitted to the governor and the legislature by August 1st, 2012, including draft legislation and revisions to the administrative rule and regulations. Since the Advisory Council last met over a decade ago, the work is unfinished. It is clear now more than ever that improvements in government procurement needs to be addressed on a continuous basis, and it is essential to promote the culture of improvement through a newly revitalized Procurement Advisory Council that institutionalizes the process of reform of government procurement that ensures fairness, equity, transparency, accountability, and that is vital to our community and stakeholders. I look forward to the dialogue and any way to improve this legislation. Situas Masi. I'd like to recognize Speaker Teresa Lahi. Invitation of today's hearing were sent to stakeholders such as the Department of Administration Director Edward Byrne, the Acting Chief Procurement Officer Andriana Kidigwa of GSA, Attorney General Douglas Moylan of the Attorney General's Office. We have here today Public Auditor, President Mary Cotta, who is on her way from the Guam Community College, Superintendent Dr. Kenneth E. Swanson from the Guam Department of Education. We have a member here today from DOE. Director Michelle Perez from Department of Integrated Services for Individuals with Disabilities, PUC Chief Law Judge Fred Harecki, GPA General Manager John Beneventi, and Director of Guam Behavioral Health, Teresa Ariola, Director. Fiscal note was received on June 2nd, 2023, and the bill states the bill is administrative in nature and poses no fiscal impact upon any funds of the government of Guam. So at this time, I'd like to invite those that have come here today to provide testimony. Public Auditor B.J. Cruz and Jarek Hernandez from the Public Auditor's Office, if you would like to come forward. Okay, buenas, good morning, Public Auditor. You're recognized.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, Madam Speaker. I'm Benjamin Cruz, the Public Auditor, and joining me today is Jarek Hernandez, who oversees all the procurement appeals at the Office of Public Accountability. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on Bill 119-37. The Guam Office of Public Accountability supports the bill as it intends to revitalize the Guam Procurement Advisory Council to modernize and institutionalize best practices in procurement throughout the government in order to promote public confidence and achieve best value for service in our community. This is in line with the OPA's vision of the government of Guam being, quote, the standard of public trust and good governance, end of quote. In addition, it supports the OPA Strategic Plan number 3, identified in the recently published OPA Strategic Plan for calendar years 2024 to 2028, which is to continue to deliver timely decisions on procurement appeals, and Objective 3.1.3.1, update procurement appeals rules and regulations to include the use of technology to streamline and the administrative process. We believe it is important for the OPA to continue to being a member of the GPAC, as we can provide findings and recommendations identified from our audits and procurement appeal decisions to aid in matters addressed by the GPAC. We look forward to provide whatever resources necessary to assist the GPAC in improving in modernizing government procurement and contracting. Should you have any questions or concerns, please contact Joe Hernandez at our office.
Ms. Massey, Public Auditor, for your testimony and for being here this morning. Also, I'd like to call up President Mary Okada from GCC. We'll have questions after. Good morning, Dr. Okada. You're recognized whenever you're ready.
Yes. Buenas and mañanas, Senator Perez and members of the committee, recognizing Speaker Chalahi and also Senator Tello. Thank you very much. My name is Mary Okada, President of the Guam Community College, and I come today to support this bill. First, I'd like to think it's important to acknowledge the significance of this legislation in recognizing the need to modernize the procurement process, to leverage advancements in technologies and improvements in procurement best practices. The Government of Guam procurement process has been the focus of discussions for many years, and many respected and intelligent people have made efforts to improve on the existing procurement system. The results, while well-intentioned and incrementally impactful, have been outpaced by efficiencies achieved through advances in technology and the speed of commerce today. Simply put, faster and cheaper is achievable and quickly becoming the standard in the marketplace today. There's no reason the Government of Guam shouldn't expect the same while maintaining integrity and accountability in the process. Guam Community College stands in support of the intent of this legislation and inclusion and GCC's inclusion in the Procurement Advisory Board. As you know, the Guam Community College facilitates procurement training required for GovGuam employees who are involved in the procurement process. While there is a high demand for the training, it is difficult to find qualified instructors to conduct the training because they're too busy in their primary roles as procurement officers for their respective organization. This is certainly an area that the Procurement Advisory Council should consider in the streamlining process to allow for programs that train the trainers in procurement so we can certify more qualified instructors. Additionally, the mandate to make recommendations to streamline and modernize the procurement process for the Government of Guam will allow the Advisory Council to look at best practices and processes in other entities and jurisdictions and make recommendations to adopt proven processes and systems. Simplification and automation of the processes can help reduce errors, redundancies, and could reduce the time for the procurement of goods and services without sacrificing protections in place to safeguard the public's interest. There are several high-quality subject matter experts in this area, such as Attorney John Thomas Brown and Dr. Jerry Perez, who could be considered to help guide this process. Again, I thank you for considering Guam Community College to participate in this very important process of improving the Government of Guam procurement so that it safeguards the public interest while also providing an efficient process that can capitalize on modern procurement practices and processes. Thank you again for allowing me to testify in support of this measure. Sidus Masi.
Sidus Masi, Dr. Okada, and thank you for both for being here. So I guess the questions are, there's a couple questions, and I guess for people that have, first of all, I want to recognize Senator Taitagui and Senator Quinata. Thank you for being here. So there's a lot of criticism about task forces and boards, and I know that we've kind of since the decade, right? We realize that this is an issue that needs to be addressed, not just one time, but continually. And especially with the advancements, like you said, over the decades since this council first last met. What can you provide as far as advice or improving this legislation to ensure there's staying power in this council?
I know there's been attempts by the administrations and prior administrations to try to get this board together, and I believe there is some sort of advisory council that is now in effect at the administration with Mr. Burns as the head of it.
Yeah, the policy office. Yeah, that's the group that's supposed to develop the regulations, but the advisory council is more about looking forward and developing policies in general, so.
And I know the late Judge John Pinko chaired a committee at one point, and it was very difficult to get all of the agencies together to meet. I was in the legislature at the time when we tried to get them to meet, but it was just very difficult for them to sit and agree on policy. But I'm hoping that with this, that we can try to reinstate this office and improve the policies and procedures, update them, and make things better, because we'd like to make sure that we don't have too many procurement appeals, and we'd like to make sure that things go smoothly out there so we can get the equipment and supplies and personnel that procurement provides for the government that's very necessary.
Thank you. Dr. Cotta?
So I think the first thing is that we have to recognize that we want this to work. And I think that by bringing this advisory council together, I think the members that have been identified and the support that we get from the respective agencies, we recognize that there are challenges in procurement. I remember many years ago when we wanted to fix HR and some of the processes, they created a subgroup called HROC. And all of the HR administrators from the various agencies got together to discuss what works and what doesn't work. And so hopefully this same attitude, I guess, towards wanting to fix things for the betterment of the organizations and the government of Guam as a whole, and businesses, because they are frustrated with the process that currently exists many times. And so we want this to work. So I think with the individuals that have been identified, we have our initial launch, and we monitor. When we put ourselves, like the OPA always says, put your Gantt chart together and tell us when it's going to be done. And if you have that on the front end, we work towards that goal. I think we just, we got to make this work. We got to make it happen, because everybody depends on this in order to efficiently run our organizations. And we see the effects of automation. So for example, at the community college, we've automated our procurement process. So we're not pushing paper from one office to another, because it takes a lot of time and money to walk a piece of paper. We do it now electronically, including the certification of funds. But we don't we don't give up the accountability component, because everything that is in the procurement record, although it's transmitted electronically, is still has levels of authority for certain purchases. And so by doing that, it helps us with our efficiencies. And so I can see that automation on our side has worked. It's cut back a lot on what we rely on in terms of copying services and buying supplies. And so that's an efficiency that we've now allocated to other areas of the institution that we can use the funding for. So I think that, first, the willingness to want to make this happen. I think you've got the right players at the table that want to see this be very successful. So thank you.
I appreciate those responses. And you both have provided a lot of recommendations, and you have modeled, what needs to be done. So the one thing in the bill that doesn't include is, the chairperson. So do you have any ideas of who the chairperson should be in this group, or should it be elected by the group?
I think maybe having the group decide who their chair is going to be will make it so that they're going to be committed to that chairperson, as opposed to having to deal with someone that they may not want to have as chair, or someone who does not want to be chair.
Okay.
Same.
Dr. Cotta? Okay. And then quorum, do you think there needs to be a structure as far as quorum is concerned?
I don't think so, primarily because you've identified a lot of really busy people. And if we can't meet because we don't have a quorum, that's not, but as long as we can participate, either providing comments ahead of time, engaging if we are off-island, participating that way. I think the end result will have to use some type of consensus, but I don't think having a quorum to meet should be a requirement because we want to move this forward.
I agree with Madam President.
Okay. And then the fund, there's some language, I mean, a lot of the language was taken from the original law. And, you know, since that time, there's been a lot of evolution of language to how to improve the fund. Are you satisfied with what's there in regards to, I mean, normally like what we have is it's a continuing appropriation, that sort of thing. But, I mean, I don't know if this is really going to get a lot of funding per se. It's really up to the agencies to provide that assistance. And do you think that would be sufficient?
I think to the extent that we can use collateral duties as assigned, it fits into the requirements for many people to participate.
I agree.
Okay, so it's that sweat equity is more, probably the critical aspect in this.
The benefits to the organization to streamline and automate is going to be your return on your investment. So if you believe in the process and we want to make things work, that your end result is going to be your sweat equity you put in, you're going to be able to reap the benefits with a truly automated, updated, and still accountable system.
Yeah, no, I'm all for that. I'm all for ensuring that there's a continuous process of change because, you know, who's to say that, you know, the new memberships, whether it be the legislature or executive branch, you know, it's, you know, we have a changing landscape, but we really need to have this continuous improvement in our procurement system. Okay, so thank you for that, and I'm going to open it up to my colleagues for questions. Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
I guess, did either of you participate in the previous or current advisory council?
No.
All right. And what do you, streamlining, like with technology and streamlining the systems, and what about, part of this, and what I'm hoping to see too, is this, it's like recommendations as to how to get best value and how to do best practices in writing the specifications. I feel like that's where a lot of the issues lie, because they're being done by, GSA will say to the agencies, you do it, and then the agencies sometimes feel they don't have that expertise to do that. How do you recommend, how do you see like, you would be able to take ideas from certain agencies and say this should be done in all the agencies, such as like the technology used at GCC could be adopted throughout the government, or that type of a style of how to automate? And can the same thing be done with specifications? Can we get some like standard templates as to how to write specs?
Well, I think properly trained, the procurement officials in the department ought to know how to be able to make sure that things are properly spec'd and not write it so that it seems you only want one sort of item in the community. And so, yes, but that takes training and commitment on the part of the agencies to not have self-interest in wanting a certain thing, but wanting to find the best thing at the best price.
Right.
I would say, and I'll say when we did our integrated database many years ago, we started that in 2007, and we've matured over the time, and we started to implement incrementally all the bells and whistles of the $1 million systems we purchased. And so it was because we knew it was a capability of the system we purchased, which is why we turned on the switch. And it says, okay, we're going to make this work. So we need to find out how, you know, what the workflow is. And so that allows us and our users to identify what processes it takes to get from step 1 to step 10, for example. And through that conversation, we determine the workflow. And that's how we were able to modernize what we currently do. We're trying now to do that with sick leave and annual leave requests because we're pushing a lot of paper, but there's a way for us to automate it. And so it's taking a look, not necessarily adopting what GCC has, maybe the process, not the system, because our system is very exclusive to institutions of higher ed. But it's in that process that we identified that this is something, because they are automation, they are included in the initial purchase of the software. It's just that we didn't turn on all the bells and whistles on day one. We had to incrementally get through there. So I would say that those that are in procurement, they know, and they can also help. Like I said, individuals that are professionals in their respective entities can help guide the process as well, because they see it every day. They work on it every day. And many of the frustration that they have if you don't write the specs correctly is that cheaper is not always the better product. And you got to look at, okay, it may be cheaper, but what kind of a warranty are you getting on it, or are you getting a warranty? So, I mean, those specific types of issues drive up the price sometimes. So I would say that it's through the trained professionals that we do have already in the system, and updating the processes, looking at best practices that will help improve.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I support this, and I'm glad of the choice of who will be on this council. I am thinking, too, that if there is an existing council and it's not meeting and it's not working, then it's just a matter of the leadership and getting them together. And I kind of feel you should designate a leader who you already know is going to be motivated to do that, just so that they call the meetings. They're even going to call the first meeting, you know what I mean, and keep it going. But thank you very much for your willingness to do this additional work. This is
Masi, Speaker. I'd like to recognize Senator Will Parkinson. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to recognize Senator Tadegui for any questions for this panel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to my colleagues, and of course, good morning to those who came to testify today. It's very important that your voices be heard. We so rely on you guys for showing up. I just want to bring that up because, a lot of times people don't show up, to testify, to help us make sound decisions. So I greatly appreciate you being here, taking the time out. I do have a question for both of you as to why do you think the advisory council never stayed active? Or did it once upon a time start up and then now it's not really that active anymore? Do you know the reason why?
No, ma'am, I was never part of the advisory council, and
Okay.
I've not been following them.
The reason has been twofold. One is that the members that you can see that you have on that list are people that are already working 16 hours a day, like the president, at her job. But to add this additional responsibility, makes it only 18 or 20 hours as opposed to the 16 that they're currently doing. And it's hard for them to keep coming if the advice that they're providing is not being followed. And the problem that we've had over the last 2 decades with procurement is that I've chaired groups that tried to rewrite the procurement policy. And when we bring it to the legislature for passage, if it was policy that was written by government attorneys and government procurement people, as soon as it hits the floor, the hall, and it comes for testimony, the private bar shows up and the businesses come in and completely trash the policy that's being proposed. And so they're really getting tired trying to write this. And if it goes the other way, we've written and proposed policy where it's more towards the business section, and the government attorneys come in and trash it, and it dies. And so it's just so many people that have been doing it for a while just feel the futility of it and just gave up.
Some people have mentioned that the federal government, has their procurement policy intact. It's written out very well. It's understandable, and a lot of common sense is in there. Why doesn't government of Guam just adopt the federal government's procurement policy and we go from there instead of making up as we go?
That's a decision the body's going to have to make, with various arguments being the government of Guam is a $2 billion operation. Should it take up the policies that of procuring jets that are 10 times the total GPD of the government of Guam? That's, again, a policy decision.
But then again, the government, the federal government doesn't always procure jets. They procure things like pencils, pads, computers, things like that, smaller size. So, it's not like, the government of Guam is going to, procure a jet. I mean, we take those inserts from the federal government and just follow it. I think it was John Brown that mentioned that the federal government procurement is intact. It's something that we should have it. And here's a man who teaches procurement, So that being said, it's something that we really need to look in. It makes sense. It's already written. We can't seem to get our act together. So maybe something we can follow until we can. The other thing is that you mentioned, Mary, is the two individuals who are very well known, Mr. Brown and Jerry Perez as well. And the makeup of the members, how can we incorporate them? What separates these two gentlemen who have a wealth of knowledge and has the teaching skills of procurement to incorporate them into this group of individuals? Because the only one that can actually put is the governor, where it can 3 members appointed by the governor. Now it says the president of Guam Community College or her designee. I don't know, maybe you might put John Brown in there for your designee, but I would assume it'd have to be somebody that works for the government of Guam, that you're going to appoint. But a member from the general public in the private sector or nonprofit. These two gentlemen have such wealth of knowledge, and I'd like to utilize them before they finally decide to retire and saying, no, I'm not going to get involved again. But is there a way we can fix the language here to incorporate these two individuals?
So I think to the extent that we can rely on their expertise to help us identify some changes to the system, that we should be able to do that. These are very busy individuals, so even having them assist, we're very grateful that they've made themselves available to the extent that they can to help teach the procurement classes, but they're really busy, which is why we can't get additional classes going. But I think through the process, I think we could seek their expertise on certain areas or of the procurement and incorporate, what we can into it. Whether or not they would accept an appointment to this body, I'm not sure, because they're really busy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you so much for participating today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Quinata, you're recognized. I'd like to recognize Senator Shelton. Senator Parkinson.
Thank you, ma'am. I have no questions.
Okay, thank you. Just want to do a quick last check if anybody else would like to provide testimony for Bill 119-37. Okay, so seeing that there's no others, first of all, I'd like to thank both Public Auditor Cruz and Dr. Maricata, President Maricata, for being here and providing your support for this. And I think we all are in the same boat when it comes to, we are committed to improving procurement in the government of Guam. And it's not a simple fix. We know it's not a simple fix because there's a wide network of procurement professionals throughout the government, and we all need to work together. And that's really was the intent of this, is to revitalize a council so we can share best practices, talk, maybe address issues, and come to a uniform way of addressing them. And with your expertise in both your different areas are critical, and the ability to move mountains, I would say, for both of you. I think it's really means a lot to have your support behind this. So seeing that there are no other further testimony on Bill 119-37, this bill is duly heard. The committee will continue to receive testimony until February 22nd. Please address testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor Procurement, Statistics, Research and Planning, or it can be dropped off the mailboxes here at the GUAM Congress Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. Saduas Masi, and thank you for your attendance. Our next item on the agenda is to hear testimony on Bill 189-37 COR, sponsored by Senator Amanda L. Shelton and co-sponsored by Senators Roy A.B. Quinata, Dwayne T.D. Nicolas, Jesse A. Lujan. It's an act to add a new section 5014 to subarticle A of Article 1, to repeal section 5001D of subarticle A of Article 1, and to repeal section 5217 of subarticle B of Article 3, all of Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the Government of Guam's procurement policy in favor of individuals with disabilities. I'd like to invite the sponsor of this bill, Senator Shelton, for her opening remarks. Senator Shelton, you're recognized.
Saduas Masi, Madam Chair, and thank you for hearing Bill 189-37 and for the opportunity to introduce this measure. As you said, Bill 189-37 is an act to add a new Section 5014 to Subarticle A of Article 1 to repeal Section 5001D of Subarticle A of Article 1 and to repeal Section 5217 of Subarticle B of Article 3, all of Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the Government of Guam's procurement policy in favor of individuals with disabilities. The bill is co-sponsored by Senators Roy Quinata, Dwayne Nicolas, and Jesse Lujan. I introduced Bill 189-37, authorizing the Government of Guam to procure supplies or services from any nonprofit employing individuals with disabilities or a business owned by an individual or individuals with disabilities. Bill 189-37 provides, notwithstanding any other provision of law, that if any entity of the Government of Guam intends to procure any supply or service which is offered by a nonprofit corporation employing individuals with disabilities or a business concern owned by an individual or individuals with disabilities, that entity shall procure such supply or service from that nonprofit or business if the supply or service is available within the period required by the procuring entity and the price of the supply or service does not exceed 105% of the lowest price bidder. Guam law, specifically 5 GCA Section 5217, allows for a contract to be awarded for a supply or service without competition when the contractor is a nonprofit corporation employing sheltered or disabled workers. As a condition of the award of the contract, the law requires contractors to certify that labor on the project will be performed by a disabled person, except that supervisory personnel do not have to be disabled. The authority provided in Bill 189 shall be in addition to any other procurement benefit a nonprofit corporation or business may be entitled to under Guam law as an employer of or a business owned by individuals with disabilities. Madam Chair and colleagues, Bill 189-37 recognizes the important role the government serves in helping improve the lives of our most vulnerable citizens. Nationally, through the Ability One program, the U.S. government provides employment opportunities for people who are blind or have significant disabilities. The Ability One program provides high-quality products and services, including, but are not limited to, aircraft, vehicular and electrical equipment and supplies, food processing, packaging and distributing, medical and dental supplies, and office supplies and furnishing. The Ability One program benefits not only individuals with disabilities, the program reduces the need for taxpayer resources through reduced disability payments and contributes to the national economy through the employment of individuals with disabilities. Bill 189-37 is modeled after similar procurement policies the legislature adopted during the 31st and 36th Guam legislatures in support of service-disabled veteran-owned businesses in Public Law 31-115 and women-owned businesses in Public Law 36-26. Bill 189-37 strengthens our support for individuals with disabilities consistent with 17 GCA Section 41210B, which requires at least 2% of GovGuam's workforce to represent individuals with disabilities through direct employment or by contract with nonprofit organizations. With that, Madam Chair, I look forward to our discussion this morning and to working with our colleagues and others to include any amendments that may be necessary to Bill 189-37 to move forward. Sijuis Masi for this opportunity.
Sijuis Masi, Senator Shelton. So is there anyone here that would like to provide testimony at this time on Bill 189-37? Okay, so we have no one signed up. We have not received written testimony, but we did send out invitation letters to all the stakeholders, or the key stakeholders, for this bill. So the same ones, I believe, for the first bill. So that would be the acting CPO, Andriana Kidigwa, Director Byrne, Department of Administration, the Attorney General, Douglas Moylan. We also sent it to Public Auditor BJ Cruz, President Mary Cotta, Superintendent Kenneth Swanson of GDOE, Director Michelle Perez of DISIT, PUC, and John Beneventi, GM for Guam Power Authority, as well as Director Teresa Ariola. So fiscal note states that the bill is administrative in nature, poses no fiscal impact. Sorry, let me double check that. Yeah, it states that there's no fiscal impact upon any funds of the government of Guam. So at this point, since we don't have any testimony, I just would like to open it up to my colleagues for any questions, comments on the bill. It does a lot of changes, so basically I believe it reforms some of the existing code. And like you said, Senator Shelton, it models a previous law that we passed to provide carve-outs for both women and veterans. So I do look forward to getting the testimony from these agencies to see what the impact has been, or how has it affected government procurement. So I'd like to open up to my colleagues for any questions, comments. Speaker Terlahi. You're recognized.
Thank you. I'm not prepared to question at this point. I'd like, there was a similar bill, I thought, in a previous term, and I'm just trying to find my notes to see. I thought there was additional testing, but I'll research that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Senator Taitigui, if you have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I too would like to see not just, Guam law, but, this also deals with some federal, regulations that's currently in place in dealing with contracts. Other than this, but and look forward to hearing the testimony from other individuals. That'll help us, gather our thoughts too and decide whether this is really a good thing. I mean, anything we can do to help individuals with disabilities, there's no doubt. I mean, we have quite a bit of things in place right now. So I just want to make sure that there's a fair shake all around. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Taitigui. Senator Quinata. Okay, thank you. Senator Parkinson? No questions, ma'am. Okay, thanks. Maybe a question for the sponsor of the bill. I know in the previous legislation for women-owned, there was a certification that was tied to the federal definitions. Is there one here that is provided in this bill as far as, is there something similar in federal law that we can follow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, there's no specific definition included in this bill. There's no definition section, but I would be open to that being added in the committee report process.
Okay, thank you so much. So I would like to now offer the floor for any closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I hope that we will be able to get some testimony from our different stakeholders within the government and throughout the community, from some businesses who I know are in support of this bill, who have not had the time to submit anything yet or to be here this morning, but I will assist in any way that I can and work with your committee to do so. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Appreciate that offer for collaboration. So seeing that there are no further testimony on Bill 189-37, this bill is duly heard. Again, the committee will continue to receive testimony until February 22nd. Please address all testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning, which can be dropped off the mailboxes here at the Guam Congress Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. All right, so our next item is to hear testimony on Bill 206-37, sponsored by Senator William A. Parkinson. It's an act to add a new section 8113.16 to Article 1 of Chapter 8, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to providing temporary emergency power capacity. I'd like to offer the floor to Senator Parkinson for his opening remarks.
Thank you. Hafa day, everyone. Thank you for coming today. Bill 206-37 LS is the second bill in the two parts that I have introduced on behalf of GPA. The first one was Bill 201, which was a bill to let us repair emergency repairs on down existing diesel generators. And this bill is a companion to that as a waiver on the procurement rules for temporary power generation. Both bills were introduced to me by GPA in an attempt to get ahead of the summer peak for electricity so that we can avoid a summer of load shedding. Bill 201-37 failed on the floor, and so I would like to offer this opportunity to GPA to speak with this body, because the problem that led to the failure of 201 were not technical, but so much more political. There is a disagreement in this body on whether or not GPA has exhausted all their options. You have made the case to me that you have, and this bill is necessary, but the body as a whole does not agree. So I would like to welcome GPA to come speak on this bill and make their case to the body. And with that, I yield the rest of my time.
All right, thank you, Senator Parkinson. So as of prior to today's public hearing, we sent invitations to Director Byrne from the Department of Administration, Acting Chief Procurement Officer Andriana Kidigwa of GSA, Attorney General Douglas Marlin, Public Auditor BJ Cruz, PUC Chief Administrative Law Judge Fred Harecki, and GPA General Manager John Beneventi. A fiscal note was received on December 11th, 2023. It states, in its current form, the bill is administrative in nature and would not have fiscal impact on appropriations. However, there are cost impacts to GPA ratepayers should PUC authorize GPA to proceed with procurement outlined in the legislation. Those are some of the items that were mentioned in the fiscal note. We have received written testimony from GPA, who is also going to provide, I believe, their written testimony. So I'd like to call on Beatrice Limtiaco, and if she wants her staff to join her as well. So if you could just introduce yourselves into the record.
Hafa-day Senators, my name is Tracy Limtiaco. I'm the Assistant General Manager for Administration and acting GM at the time, as John B. is off island. And with me today is Jen Sablon. Jen is our Assistant General Manager of Operations.
Okay, good morning to both
Good morning.
of you. So I'd like to recognize you to provide testimony on Bill 206.
Thank you very much. So again, my name is Tracy Lim-Tiaco, and I appreciate the opportunity to present testimony in favor of Bill 20637 LS today. As Senator Parkinson had mentioned, Bill 206 was introduced at GPA's request, originally submitted in November 2023. This proposed legislation was drafted in consideration of the projected procurement hurdles associated with the typical bid process for temporary power services. Several events have occurred since November 2023, ultimately resulting in a change in approach to this specific procurement and to the bill's construction. I'm going to go through a summary of key efforts and events. GPA has been in the process of replacing its aged power generation infrastructure with the new 198 megawatt Ukuru combined cycle plant, several utility scale renewable energy projects, and battery energy storage systems. The Integrated Resource Plan, also known as the Clean Energy Master Plan, confirms that these projects will improve reliability, resiliency, and affordability of clean energy on a sustainable basis. As of December 2019, GPA forecasted the commissioning of the 180 plus megawatt of the utility scale renewable solar PV and the 198 megawatt Ukuru power plant by 2023. The new generation capacity would allow the retirement of the aged Cabrous plants and reduce output of certain existing plants. The progress of these projects were hampered by the global COVID-19 pandemic, which impacted material, equipment, and personnel supply chains, delaying projects for up to 2 years. Additional schedule delays to critical milestones were incurred due to late government permits and legislative approvals, impacting the new plant commissioning date and the loss of reserve generation capacity. The 2019 procurement protest blocking GPA's award of a 40 megawatt renewable energy project was finally resolved in 2022. While the public auditor and the Superior Court upheld GPA's procurement decision, the contract did not proceed due to increased project costs. And I note that the contractor of that bid could not proceed due to the cost increase. In January 2023, GPA issued a bid for performance management contract, or PMC, services of its GIGO diesel generators. In 2023, a stay of procurement was placed due to a bidder's protest appeal at the Office of the Public Auditor. In May 2023, Typhoon Mawar caused irreparable damage to the Ukuru project's nearly complete fuel and water tanks, requiring reconstruction and further delaying the power plant's commissioning to about January 2026. Typhoon Mawar also damaged the GIGO 20 megawatt combustion turbine, significantly impacting GPA's ability to meet demand. These natural disasters added significant challenges to GPA's new generation capacity plans, pushing back the retirement of the nearly 50-year-old baseload Cabrous units, which have decreased capacity and reliability, and increased repairs with longer completion timeframes. GPA has been addressing the need for generation capacity by restoring down units, increasing generation capacity of existing units, and bringing in temporary power services, the subject of this legislation, at a reasonable cost. Significant efforts have also been made to increase renewable energy capacity, including the Phase 4 renewable energy bids that are now under review. These bids have the potential to provide over 300 megawatts of energy with battery storage. A key component of the increased generation capacity is the new Ukuru power plant. After months of reviewing the construction schedule for repairs to the typhoon-damaged fuel and water tanks and collateral impacts, GPA and Guam Ukuru Power tentatively agreed on its September 2025 as the revised target plant commissioning date, shaving 3 to 4 months from the initial post-typhoon revised schedule. Additionally, the GIGO combustion turbine, or as we say CT, rotor repair, also experienced delays in Texas. The plant was expected to return to service this month. However, transportation arrangements are just happening now, delaying the plant's return to service. In December 2023, GPA General Manager issued a certificate of emergency and authorized emergency procurement efforts to increase generation capacity of GPA's diesel generators, including up to 40 megawatts of temporary power service. The CCU and PUC approved and authorized GPA to procure up to 40 megawatts of temporary power services to be commissioned within 100 days of the notice to proceed until the 2026 commissioning of the Ukuru power plant or sooner, to address the urgent need for power capacity demand before May 2024. The CCU approved the award of temporary power services at its January 2024 meeting. The matter is before the PUC for approval at its February 2024 meeting, which is at the end of this month. GPA considered several potential sites to place the temporary power generators, initially selecting a lot near the Cabras Power Plant campus, formerly designated for the Ukuru Reserve generators. It was later determined that GPA's GIGO power plant is the most viable for temporary power services using diesel engines because of the required air permits and fuel infrastructure already in place. The GIGO site, however, houses the GIGO diesel generators. The award of the temporary power bid will require the removal of these generators. While it is possible for the generators to be assessed and repaired at another location, the operations, power generation capability of such are unlikely, as the necessary permitting and infrastructure are not available at alternative sites. Furthermore, amendments to the bid scope of work would significantly differ from that originally contained in the current bid. Thus, GPA canceled the GIGO diesel PMC bid, which was the subject of a procurement appeal at the OPA. For the foregoing reasons, GPA proposes to remove the Article 3 and Article 12 waivers, Source Selection, and Procurement Appeals Board. Further, updates to the capacity and site location of the temporary power services should be made. A copy of the proposed changes are attached to this testimony and will be provided electronically. Actually, we have provided it electronically. While GPA is hopeful that the temporary power services bid will proceed without further delay, a protest and/or appeal will cause this very tight performance schedule to be missed, because the emergency procurement laws do not allow an automatic lift of stay in the event of protest. Under 5 GCA section 5425 subsection G, a lift of stay requires the Attorney General to make a written determination that the award of the contract without delay is necessary to protect the substantial interest of Guam. Based on recent experience, GPA has no confidence that the Attorney General will respond to its request. Procurement law is meant to protect how funds are spent on behalf of ratepayers and taxpayers. GPA's emergency procurement process has been transparent and accountable, with the CCU and PUC oversight and approvals at every step. GPA is asking this body to assist with its efforts to get more capacity online as soon as possible by clearing potential procurement hurdles that do serve the best interests of the community or the ratepayers. And for these foregoing reasons, GPA requests your support of Bill 20637 LS as amended. And Senators, the proposed changes of the bill are on page 404 of the written testimony. I would like to note that on line 8, there is an error, and I believe that GPA's office has submitted a revised proposed revision to both Senators Perez and Parkinson's offices. The change to be made is that it is Article 2 and subarticle F, not Article 1. And so with that, Senators, thank you again for allowing us to testify.
Okay, thank you. So this bill was introduced back in November, and I know you laid out a timeline of the, I guess, the journey that GPA has taken to increase capacity. So also you GPA was able to issue a certificate of emergency, thus allowing GPA to have access to the emergency procurement. So is it absolutely necessary to remove procurement requirements if you have the access to emergency procurement?
So we did suggest that we take away, that we remove from the bill the requested waivers for source selection and the procurement board appeal. However, we still are very concerned about any delays that a protest will have. And we are specifically looking at what would happen if we were able to have an automatic lift of stay. And so our current read, and our attorney, Marianne Wolishek, is not here. She's testifying in a different matter. But our read on the procurement law, even under emergency procurement, still requires the AG to issue and agree with GPA that there is a substantial interest that lifts the stay. And in our testimony, we did say that we do not have any confidence that the AG will even cooperate, even respond with GPA's request, whether it be positively or negatively. And so with this, with the tight delivery requirements that this emergency procurement has, we'd like to clear the hurdles. And so we do believe it is necessary. May 2024 is significant because that is typically the onset of hotter temperatures. And with any increased demand, if we do not have increased capacity, we still have that looming threat of load shedding.
So does the emergency procurement satisfy, so I know you want to be able to lift a stay, but has GPA already solicited an emergency procurement in regards to this? And has there been a protest?
So yes, we have solicited this under emergency procurement, let me be clearer. So we have solicited temporary power services under emergency procurement using the general manager's certificate of emergency. So we are in the process of approving the award at this point. GPA has gone above and beyond what the law allows, or requires rather, instead of just selecting, basically using a sole source selection under emergency procurement. We still went out and we advertised. We invited bidders to bid. We cooperated with it. We notified both the CCU and the PUC that we were doing this. We acquired the approvals. We had several bidders reply. However, only one bidder could meet the timeline. The timeline is very tight, so 100 days after notice of award. To this date, we do not anticipate a protest, but who does? So GPA has been plagued with protests, and all of these projects, which we have given you a summary of, these take time, and they take time away from the momentum of the project. And I was listening to what President Okada was saying earlier. The protest environment is it's very likely that people will protest just because a bidder can game the system that way. And for the rest of the bidders, for the rest of people who would bid, this chills the procurement environment. And so GPA is not asking for what it did before. As time has progressed and elapsed since November 2023, we have taken every opportunity that the current procurement code allows us to self-help, right? So we realized that when we finally met the requirements for emergency procurement, the GM issued a certificate of emergency and we proceeded. We've done all of this under the guise of being sure that we are as transparent and accountable as possible. If we do have a protest, and if that protest becomes an appeal, we will not make the 100-day timeline if we cannot have an automatic lift of stay.
Okay. So we did pass the bill 36, right? The critical procurement bill. Yeah.
Correct.
And, I mean, those are options for GPA, because that one would lift the stay, because it basically ends with the public auditor. I mean, there's different types of procurement that GPA can use to try to, expedite these procurements without having to remove the guardrails of the procurement law. I mean,
Senator, I'm sorry, but I thought 3637 also had a specific funding attached to it.
Yes,
That would
yes.
be grants. So this is an O&M funded activity.
Okay. So I think that, so you did send out a solicitation, emergency procurement.
We did, and we went beyond that, where we advertised, we invited folks. We wanted to be as transparent as possible. Also, it's not every day that you solicit these types of temporary power services. The last time we did this was back in 2015. So we wanted to ensure that potential bidders and the public in general was notified of what we had intended to do. In addition to advertising through the procurement process, this was also under open government, where we discussed this. We discussed this in both CCU and PUC meetings numerous times.
Okay, yeah. I do appreciate all your hard work, right, in trying to get power to the community. I'm still thinking that there is a procurement in play right now, and I would like to see, the outcome at this point. I mean, this is another tool perhaps, but I guess you're stating that you're going to pull back on some of the, I
Yes.
guess, the exemptions, which is let's see that again.
Yeah, to summarize, we would...
Source selection is...
The source selection and then the procurement appeals board, so that's Article 2, subarticle F, and Article 12. However, we would still like to keep... we want to keep Article 2, subarticle F in there, and Article 9 with the legal and contractual remedies in there. Although we didn't state specifically about 5150 and the duties of the Attorney General, that also hampers our ability to move forward. The Attorney General has pushed out a lot of requirements after removing all of the SAG designations for attorneys. And I don't think the GPA is the only agency or GUAM agency that is having problems with this. All this adds is additional time to the procurement without any time frame for the AG to say we are going to come back within this time frame and give you advice or let you know our thoughts. The results of this bureaucracy is that we find ourselves having to go back to vendors to ask them if prices are still valid. So we do ask, please give us a waiver on Article 2, subsection F, and also Article 9. This is, I feel, very limited. It's limited to just this temporary power contract. We are not asking for waivers on source selection. We have used emergency procurement. In our read, we cannot use the critical procurement bill or the law that was just passed. And this is where we are. So we're trying to be proactive so that we don't have to come back and ask for waivers or assistance when we are in the midst of protests. This is very different from anything else that GPA is doing. We have firm timelines that we're trying to meet in order to have the generation capacity that we need for the summer.
Okay. And then Article 9, if you could just reiterate what that is.
Legal and contractual remedies.
Okay. And so basically you're trying to lift the stay. Is that what you're trying to get at? Lifting the stay?
We would
and
like
no
the
agent?
mechanism of an automatic lift of stay should a protest, should an appeal go to the OPA. And again, With our last appeal at the OPA for the GIGO PMC services, we had asked the Attorney General, our attorney had followed up numerous times to please opine. Would you please opine on whether or not you agree? And we just got zero response. So anticipating any roadblocks for something as important as temporary power is exactly what GPA should be doing. And so that's why we're here today. This is why we've asked for 206 to be heard.
Okay. I appreciate your comments and recommendations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I would like to recognize Senator Parkinson.
Thank you, ma'am. So, if there is a protest, if I'm understanding this correctly, we will not meet the May deadline for some of these projects that you are suggesting.
If we have, if a protest is resolved within the agency, the initial protest, we should not have an issue. However, if the protest continues and becomes an appeal to the OPA, without an automatic lift of stay, it is highly unlikely that we're going to meet this tight deadline. So if you're thinking about the period of performance to be May 2024, and it's April 15th right now, and the contractor has approximately 100 days to perform, time is of the essence, and I can't imagine that any contractor, especially the one that we selected, and we only had one contractor who could meet this tight timeline, that we would meet May 2024.
If we do not meet the May deadline, can you go into detail about the power supply and demand scenario?
I'm going to turn that over to Jen.
Hi.
She's much more knowledgeable.
So I'm Jennifer Sablon, the Assistant General Manager for Operations, and we've been dealing with capacity issues. The GIGO PMC was a mechanism to help us deal with regaining some capacity of our GIGO diesel units, which was a 40 megawatt facility, is now down to 6 megawatts. So not having that PNC aboard has derailed that recovery. We are still trying to work with that, and it's actually part of our scope, working with the temporary power to assist us. But that's a capacity we don't have. In addition, we lost the 20 megawatt CT, which is under repair, and we are trying to work with others to assist in transportation and expediting transportation so we can get that capacity back by March. We are also working with our other PMC contractors to bring in necessary parts to repair other diesel units. So as we are working towards that, we are looking at May as the timeline for a lot of this to happen or to be completed by. But we are also seeing increases in temperature, or expect increases in temperature by May, which increases load. So as we start to recover our capacity, we expect that the temperatures are going to increase load. Our units still need to be maintained. They need to be outaged. Our MEC 8 and 9 or PD 8 and 9 units require regular maintenance schedules. They require 2 to 3 days outages to do the necessary maintenance so that those units don't fall down forced outages. So, we're trying our best to bring in the necessary repairs, address the issues, but the temporary power is really going to be the key in providing the reserves necessary to manage the capacity needs and avoid any load shedding. I don't know if I addressed your question, sir.
So, so would it be fair to say, bottom line, protests basically would mean load shedding during the summer?
Protests could lead to a delay in the award and the commissioning, which may lead to load shedding in the summer, sir.
Mrs. Lim Tiaco, I know in your career you have been a successful president of a private business on Guam, In fact, you were Businesswoman of the Year, correct?
No, sir. Only a nominee.
Only a nominee. Well, that's nothing to sneeze at either. So in your experience, how does the government procurement process compare to your private sector experience?
It's night and day.
If
It's very
pri-
difficult, sir, to participate in government procurement and GUAM procurement. You had mentioned, and I know this is not dealing with the other bills that you had heard earlier today, but someone had mentioned federal procurement. Federal procurement is much more straightforward. It's more straightforward. So in my current capacity at GPA, we have contractors, especially construction contractors, who choose not to procure or even bid with GovGuam. The current process is just ripe with delays. It requires a lot more resources, money, certainly time, and it's not to the benefit of a lot of contractors. So I agree, again, this is not for the prior bill, but I agree wholeheartedly with what the public auditor and President Okada had said earlier. So that's how it is. It's night and day.
If a private sector company had to run under a government procurement system, would that help or hinder the company?
My obvious answer is to hinder. However, there are different reasons that these laws are in place. So the government procurement laws are supposed to protect ratepayers and taxpayers, and provide accountability and transparency. And so the requirements to have open and transparent bids versus just sole source at any time, it would be disingenuous for me to just summarize that and say that it's easier to procure within a private industry procurement scenario, because it doesn't have the same protections.
Do you think the current procurement process is a hindrance on the efficiency of the government of Guam?
These are really hard questions because they're very general. Generally, yes. However, I believe that with some improvements, some of which have been proposed earlier today and have been proposed by Senator Sabina's office, I think some improvements to the current law will help. It will remove some of these impediments.
Yeah, and I apologize for having these difficult general questions, but I think it's important to have these difficult general questions because I've seen a trend in this recent legislature where it seems that because of a lot of federal dollars that we are constantly, I feel like every month we're trying to waive some sort of procurement so we could get dollars spent effectively before we lose them. And so we kind of just find ourselves in a procurement whack-a-mole where we're going to waive this one, then we're going to waive this one, then we're going to waive this one. Oh, maybe not that one, but we're going to waive this one. And so it's really put the legislature in this place where we get to decide what procurements are waived and which ones are not. And so really, I asked you these questions in an effort to help you convince the rest of the body to the necessity of the procurement waivers. Because as I said, we're kind of playing whack-a-mole on it because I feel that we have a general problem with procurement in general. I have worked for the federal government for 10 years, and I know their procurement was like. I would have a broken chainsaw in the morning, and I could get it repaired in the afternoon. I could get a new one bought in the afternoon. There is a functioning procurement system, and I think with this as another example of us having to play procurement waiver whack-a-mole, we should have a bigger, more general conversation about procurement reform in general, and maybe looking at things, looking at models that do work.
I appreciate that, Senator. And to be fair and complete in my testimony, GPA has been very proactive, as has Senator Perez and her office. We've had, probably in the last couple of years, had several conversations about the proposed improvement of procurement. And specifically, GPA has approached Senator Perez, and she's been working with us to address the IIJA and IRA large federal grant programs that I believe that Guam will have a really good share of receiving. And so those funds, like you had mentioned, those funds need to be spent by a certain period of time. In this environment that we are, where we are also competing with large federal projects on Guam, whether that's MilCon or otherwise, it means that our pool of contractors grows smaller and smaller. So if we continue to follow the Guam procurement law as it is, we're going to be behind. So we need to be proactive.
Okay.
And coming back to this bill, that's what GPA is trying to do with Bill 206, is to be proactive.
And I appreciate that because I recognize how long this process can be. And so when we introduced this in November, I know a lot of people looked at me sideways when I was trying to say, hey, I'm trying to prevent this problem in May. And so I appreciate GPA being proactive at it. And I have just one more general difficult question for you. As someone who's worked on both ends, as someone on the private sector and in GovGuam, aside from this bill, how can we improve the process from your view, having worked in both?
Again, not to bring up the previous bills, but the public auditor and President Okada had some very good suggestions about that. And I believe that someone did speak about, maybe it was Senator Taitigui, perhaps we should adopt the federal approach in whole. That requires a lot of discussion and debate and figuring out how our current processes, procurement processes work. Also, we do not have the resources that the federal government does. So how do we manage those? I think it can be done. It can be done. I think this effort to want to change and improve our procurement laws has been in the making, and there's definitely in this legislature a lot of political will to get that happen, to make that happen. So I think we can do it. We can improve it.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate your testimony. One of the concerns that I know people in the public and people on the body had is GPA just trying to gin the procurement because they're trying to give a contract to their friend? Are you guys just trying to pull one over the people of Guam?
No. No, and as I had mentioned earlier in our testimony and then explaining what we've done, we have gone above what is required under emergency procurement. We treated as best as possible this emergency procurement as a regular bid through the advertisements, through the sharing of information, through the meetings at CCU and PUC. So no, sir, we have every intention, and it's our goal to make this a very transparent and for us to be accountable.
Yes, and I appreciate that. I know in a lot of ways I've been very critical of GPA and the CCU, but I never want it to be said that we lose sight of what the ultimate goal is, and that's keeping the lights on for everybody. And so while I may criticize on one hand, in this regard, you have made your case to me. I think you have exhausted your options. I cannot speak for the rest of the body, but you know where your work needs to be done if we're going to get this bill passed. You have my support, and with a little bit of legwork on GPA's end, I think you might be able to get the support of this body as well. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator. Speaker Chalahi, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Tracy, Acting Director, and Jen. Thank you for your testimony and for your work. I think, you hit, well, first of all, I think that the generalizations as to the procurement law are actually not that relevant right now, because what we're going to do with this bill is jump into one particular procurement that is active, and if I heard your testimony correct, it's already been awarded.
No, not yet. So we're getting the approvals for award. We have the approval of the CCU in its January meeting, and now we're seeking the PUC's approval. And from that approval time, that is where we are concerned, is if we have any protests and appeal at that point after award, we aren't going to miss, we're very concerned about the deadline.
All right. Okay, and that's actually what was the case with the previous bill, was that was, my understanding, trying to authorize exemptions from certain procurement law for an award that had already been made and in fact was under protest. And I think you testified today that the protest has, well, that you withdrawn that or award.
Yes, we actually
Revoked
canceled
it?
the bid, Speaker, because
Canceled, yeah.
we could not, it could not have been performed. We need to remove those existing generators from
Okay.
that site.
Right, and so, for me, that highlights, you know, we were going to jump into that in the middle of a protest already existing, and then the plan changed. And so, I'm happy to support your new plan, you know, to get the 40 megawatts in, oh, we're changing it now. You're recommending back to GIGO. The bill says PD, but you were now
Correct.
recommending. Okay, and to get that going up there, of course, I am very concerned about waiving any portions of the procurement law. I feel like that's exactly why, if I was one of the potential bidders or awardees, and then the rules of the game change in the middle of the game, of course, you know, I'm going to be very concerned. And that's what I'm hoping the public auditor will come back, because I wanted to ask him that. Like, so if there's no award, then of course there's still potential for protests on
And
the
even
award.
after award,
Pardon?
even after award, there's still
That's what I mean.
potential.
It's
right?
not been awarded yet, so when it is awarded, there is potential for award. And I mean, potential for a protest. And do you know what was the basis of the previous procurement appeal? Or protest?
Yes, for the GIGO PMC services, the bidder who protested that they did not meet, that they were not selected. They did not meet the minimum requirements, and their basis, their argument was that they had met the minimum requirements for the previous bid, but not this one, not the current one. GPA countered and said, this is a brand new bid. The specifications have changed. So when you change the specifications, there's no guarantee that because you had met all the criteria for the previous bid that you would for this one. And so the protest, that bid was canceled due to necessity.
Okay.
It was canceled because we need that site, and so we need to remove those units. The
Right.
the
So that-
propensity of this current bid for temp power being canceled is highly unlikely. We simply need the generation.
Right, because there were no other bidders. All right, and then I am so glad that in your testimony, you're suggesting to narrow down the parts of the procurement law that will be waived by this bill. So I think that's a great approach. Make it as narrow as possible. So in your testimony, you've also said that you definitely want an automatic lift of the stay. You don't want to stay, meaning that the project has to halt while anyone's addressing the protest or an appeal on that protest. And I can see why you would want that because of the time frame. But for me, the bill is still much broader than that. It's waiving the entire Article 9. I think Article 9 is the one that involves the Attorney General. Let me just double check.
Yes.
No, yeah, Section 5150 talks about the Attorney General's duties, and that's the requirement that the Attorney General reviews this procurement for legality and form for anything over 500,000, and this is over 500,000, correct?
Clearly, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And so, yeah, I understand your issues with the timing with the Attorney General, but this is exactly how we ended up in so many problems, right? Without any review by council. However, if we could just narrow it down to the stay on appeal, I would support that.
Okay.
And the other one is, let me see, subarticle F is the duties of the Attorney General, so that's the Attorney General. And then the other one is Article 9, that's the entire article talks about legal and contractual remedies. That's anything and everything, and I wish that would be narrowed down as well to just the stay part, right?
At the advice of this body, we will leave that up to you. However, our main goal at this point is, yes, we need to proceed. So if there is a protest, we have no confidence that the Attorney General will even respond to our request to lift the stay. So if this body would like to give us an automatic stay and amend the bill further, we would definitely appreciate that. That would address our foremost concern on regarding the 100 days performance period.
All right, so the Article 9 includes Subarticle A, which is pre-litigation resolution of controversies.
Correct.
Subarticle B, solicitations or awards in violation of the law. Subarticle C is the interest. Subarticle D, the waiver of sovereign immunity. I don't want to get rid of that. And the limitations on actions. And subarticle E is the procurement data. I don't want to waive that either. So I just think if we narrow it down, we can reach your goals, hopefully. And just in general, I've supported waiver of procurement laws in the past, for example, for I think the ARP funds or some certain funding sources that we had waived. But yeah, we take a big risk when we do that. I know you know that. That's the government's risk, and that's probably why all these processes are in place, of course, to reduce the risk to the taxpayers that they're going to lose out or lose value for their purchases. But I would support a narrowing of this, and just want to make sure on the record, this is going to give us more power in May, right? Would that reduce load shedding, or would it eradicate load shedding?
I'll turn it over to Jen again.
Well, the intention, Speaker, is really to avoid the load shedding. I mean, we can't expect several units to go down at once, but we're trying to avoid at least load shedding if 2 of our big units go out at once. And we've had that where we've had planned maintenance and then a forced outage of another unit. And that's what's been contributing to the load shedding events that we've had in the past months.
Can you just explain one more time, Jen, what changed? Like, why did you think at one point you could repair GIGO and now we can't?
Well, the GIGO diesels, like I said, was a 40 megawatt facility, and we were hoping with the PMC to try to restore that capacity. It's down to 8, and because we're using the site, because we don't have units that are functioning at that site, we're going to use the site for the GIGO, the temporary power. We only have enough units to restore and return to service at that site. So we would limit the return of a 40 megawatt facility to only 20. We are looking at an alternative site to put the rest of those units, but it needs to be site prepped, and it'll take some time, as well as either replacing or repairing those down generators. So that's a 20 megawatt capacity that will take time to recover. In addition, we didn't have the GIGO CT unit. That was 20 megawatts. So, just over time, we've had to deal with some of these shortages and procurement issues that have caused us some delays. The typhoon did take out the GIGO CT, so that was a typhoon-related event. Cabris 1 and 2 is our baby right now. It's a steam power plant, and it has hundreds of boiler tubes in it. It's a 50-year-old unit that we've gone and replaced tubes here and there. We can't say which tube will burst, right? We don't expect the ones that we've replaced in the past, but there's still hundreds left in that boiler that may may have some little life left. And so we've changed the operation to try to minimize any potential effects due to high pressures or high temperatures. So that unit did reduce its capacity. So where it was in its good days, 66 megawatts, it's now 40. And it's that way so that we have 40 versus 0 for 5 to 10 days because of a boiler tube leak. So as much as we'd like to address the tube leaks, we wouldn't know where to start as far as when these tubes will fail. We have certain general areas that we can work on, but we'd have to go in, do some kind of testing to see that. And these are units we're actually going to retire once Ukuru comes online. So we're having to deal with where do we put our investments, and now we're putting it into temporary power, which is helping to replace some of that lost capacity as well.
Thank you, and thank you for your explanation and your work on those things. One more question, Acting Director Tracy. You said the time frame for the AG's response is a little unpredictable, or it's long, and that's because he's made an additional requirements. What are some of those requirements, the additional requirements that the AG has put on agencies?
Prior to removing the SAG certifications, our in-house counsel performed all of the contract reviews. So anything with regarding procurement, we had our legal counsel serve as SAG. Our legal counsel continues to do that, Marianne. She continues to review every procurement every step of the way. However, without her SAG, this requires us now to go back and forth to the AG's office. The AG's office has reissued very old documents, checklists, and timeframe requirements to the agencies, including GPA. We have gone back and forth since the beginning of last year, asking the AG's office for clarification. These forms are, many of them have not been updated for years, if not decades. So, we have had clarification, some in email, some in memo form, but the process is still not tight. It's still not very clear. Going back and submitting to the AG's office, and I believe that, again, I'm sorry I keep mentioning we're referring back to the previous testimony, but just like President Okada had said, GPA is also going electronic to gain efficiencies. Some of the requirements that the AG's office has on GPA, and I can only speak on GPA, reduces those efficiencies. They want paper copies. They want it delivered to the office. This takes time. So just again, like President Okada had said, it takes resources, and time is money. And this means that we cannot proceed with some procurement matters until we hear back from the AG's office, pick up the paper, read what they have to say. To date, there has been nothing that the AG has come back on that said that any procurement has fatal flaws in it. So, again, and this is probably attributed to not only Marianne's review, but when we do go to the CCU, we have another attorney, GWA's attorney, also reviewing this. When we go to the PUC, it's not just one attorney, but it's a team of attorneys. We have ALJ Harecki and his other administrative law judges that review these contracts.
Okay, well, I appreciate your testimony in that regard. And perhaps, aside from the bill, if you could talk to your team about sending to us the checklist, the time frame documents that you've received, and the back and forth, just so we can review and see if that's something that we can implement for all of the government, some kind of streamlined process for that.
Okay.
All right. Jesus Masi, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Speaker, if you don't mind, just to your point earlier about keeping in, for example, Article 9. If you may, I'd like to work with Senator Perez and Senator Parkinson to further amend the bill for their consideration to introduce on the floor, perhaps. It wouldn't expand the current bill. It would reduce
Narrow
the
it down,
scope, so we
yes.
don't have to come back for additional public hearings.
Thank you.
So Dizamasi, Speaker. Senator Taitigui, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Tracy. Always good to see you.
Thank you, Senator.
And thank you so much for being here to testify and providing us some information and definitely answering some of the questions. The Speaker had quite a bit of good questions that she had asked. But I just wanted to make it clear that, and if you can reiterate that the procurement now has, the bid is not been awarded to anyone. The bid is now at CCU and PUC to get approved. And so there has not been any award.
The award is in process, so we're gaining the approvals. We've received one of 2 approvals. The CCU approved the award in its January meeting.
So it has been awarded to a company already? No.
Not yet. We require 2 awards, so, I'm sorry, approvals. We require 2, so we require the CCU to approve.
Right.
After the CCU approves, then it goes to the PUC for its review and approval.
Okay, that's just the packet to send out.
No, the award. So
Okay,
we've already received the approvals.
So it has been awarded already, I mean, not been awarded, but there is already a company that has put their bid in.
Correct.
Okay, so technically it is in the process then. It has not been sent out yet so the way I would see it is that you have an RFP and you have all the specifications that's required in this RFP in order to bid on it, and then you take it to CCU and they approve it, then PUC. Once they've approved it, then you send it out to the public for an open bid. And then right now what has happened is that you have done all that already, and it has been, you have 2 people that have,
We have 1 bidder.
okay, so you only have 1 bidder. So that person has already been established, and now it's going to CCU and PUC to approve that particular one, that company that is bidded on it and which GPA wants, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it is
gaining the
not what I
approvals.
thought it was. Okay, so it is similar to, other than a protest, the next step would be a protest like the other bill, 201. As it was mentioned earlier, we had a little bit of difficulty, coming in at the end, the tail end of something that's being protested and supporting something like that. But this one has already been awarded, so you're avoiding
in the
any kind of
process.
protest.
Right. It
Okay.
has not yet been awarded. We hope it will be. If the PUC...
But there's only one person there.
Correct.
One
but we
country,
still need
one
approvals.
company, right?
Correct.
Okay. So it's pretty much now just the CCU and the PUC looking at it. That's why I wonder, why would the Attorney General, you mentioned, if you wanted to say something, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wanted to just clarify. So we had 3 interested bidders, but only 1 bidder could meet the specifications under the emergency procurement.
So only one person, one company.
Only 1 company could meet the tight
So you
timeline.
don't anticipate any of these others to protest with reason because they didn't meet the requirements in the bid, correct?
That is correct. We don't anticipate a protest. We, like we have in prior bids, we believe that we have done everything properly and transparently. However, we can never. The right to protest is very broad. So although we don't anticipate it, we must plan for when and if it happens.
So the question is that it would be so obvious to the Attorney General's office that if somebody were to protest this, that they didn't meet the specifications because only one person was able to provide everything that was in the IFB or RFP, and the other 2 were not able to provide that. So what makes you think the Attorney General, you have no confidence in him to realize this and lift this, avoid any stay that he has the authority to do if that's true to form?
The reason we have no confidence is because we did ask the Attorney General in another bid, in the GIGO PMC bid.
In another bid.
Right, to reply. We asked specifically under the 5425G to reply. We had no reply, no response. No, not a response.
Did you
for
have the
positive or
Attorney
negative.
General, was he involved in this particular RFP? Did you get him involved, like from the beginning of obtaining the 40 megawatts that you want to have? Did you engage him at the very beginning? And, so he can see what's going on, and it's very transparent, and so that
Right.
he would not have any reason, or he would give you a red flag while you're going through the process that, hey, cross your T over here, because this could be an issue. So the question is very simple. Yes or no, did you involve the Attorney General in this process for this particular bid?
This is an emergency procurement,
Right.
and so we are packaging everything and have communicated
Right.
with the Attorney General's office regarding this bid. But the process to communicate with the AG under an emergency procurement is different than under a regular RFP or IFB. I just want to make sure.
Why is it different?
Because of the different phases. So with an emergency procurement.
So you're saying the Attorney General is never involved in emergency procurements?
No, I'm not saying they're never involved. I'm
Okay.
just saying the timing is different.
Yeah.
So with RFPs or IFBs.
But they've been involved in
correct.
emergency
Over a
procurements,
certain,
yeah.
right, the timing is
Okay.
different, the requirements.
I'm just trying to wrap my hand around their no confidence. I don't think, the Attorney General wants his power to be, load shedding in his area or his family's area too. So I would think he would, oversee this. But, my good colleague, the author of the legislation, my friend, made his comment earlier. He said that Bill 201 did not pass because of it was political. Do you think that the Bill 201 didn't pass because it was political?
I really don't want to answer that question in my capacity. I think I really would like to reserve any personal feelings I have
Okay.
about politics and keep it personal and not talk about it in my
Okay, I just wanted to
capacity.
see where that little glitch is happening. But speaking of glitch, that's why it's so hard for me to allow something like this to go through without, being very transparent, without the ability to review certain procurements, because we've seen a lot of shenanigans going on. And if the Attorney General, who I believe is in the best, who's been working for the people of Guam in their best interest, would not delay something like this. But if he sees something going on, that he feels that there's some kind of shenanigans going on, then he should not lift the stay.
Agreed.
He should, you believe that, right? So if he comes in and he says, GPA, there is something very wrong here. It looks like there was some favoritism going on, and it's not like the first time this has happened in his, capacity to see that he would not lift the stay, and we would all be, relieved that now we don't have to deal with corruption in the government. That happens so much more than we'd like to know. And that's why I think that, having those checks and balances are very, very important. And I think if anything, GPA has found their way around that 201. All of a sudden, it wasn't really needed, that Bill 201. You guys were able to adjust it. But this particular bill on new equipment, I know that we have a bill on net metering that's been put into play. And this net metering actually helps commercial businesses to lift the cap of 100 megawatts up to 500. Now you would think, which the government of Guam is about 31% usage in GPA, the military about 20%, commercial almost about 28% or 20%. My numbers might be wrong, I'm just trying to guesstimate on this. But if we were to lift that net metering and give them 500 megawatts, then that would relieve some of the power that's needed to give to these commercial buildings that is willing to invest so much money on solar energy, in which we have to come to a, the 50% renewable energy by 2030, which you guys are ahead of schedule, which I thank you for that. But you would relieve the power that's needed for these commercial areas and divert that power to other areas. So, there's a mechanism in place to try and harvest, power to other areas, but GPA is against the net metering, lifting the cap for these commercial buildings, when I can only see an advantage for you, considering you're in this dire need of, needing more megawatts to stop the load shedding. So that's
Senator, but for the
concern.
record, GPA did not say that it was against the intent of lifting the cap. In GPA's testimony for the net metering bill, we did say that it's important that the rules be established and that the PUC, who had established the net metering rules, be involved. I believe it was you who asked GPA to please petition the PUC, which we have. And so that docket is in play. Furthermore, the 50% renewable energy goal that the legislature set out is 2035. GPA's goal is 2030. And additionally, regarding solar PV and net metering renewable energy, we do have enough energy during the day. When those solar customers go down at night and they do not have batteries, that adds to the load. It adds to the demand, which exacerbates GPA's challenges to meet the demand. So I understand what you are stating, and in theory it sounds good, but I work with professional engineers, and they have assured me that the answer is not that simple regarding the net metering load.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And if I'm not mistaken, they did not support, they didn't say they supported it. They just said find another way to, and we all know, even alluded to that it's going to be very difficult, but I didn't see.
Senator, GPA is very supportive of renewable energy. Our entire goal, although the legislature said renewable energy 100% by 2045, GPA's goal has been 5 years ahead of all of those goals. I can't imagine that any one agency or company on Guam is working as hard as GPA to get the renewable energy online. However, there has to be concerns about reliability addressed. Right. And when you don't have the renewable energy sources that are working, what happens? Hawaii is going through that now.
Yeah, and battery capacity, the technology for battery capacity has also made great strides. Correct. From 10 years ago. So storing battery, is much better, and companies can store battery to lift that demand, evening demand, where they utilize battery impact. Mm-hmm. So GPA as well, able to put that in your plant, in the Uguru plant, is great strides too. So, I think that it gets to a point where we just need to make sure that there are no lawsuits and that no shenanigans are going on, that we have that check and balance, and that I think that GPA needs to, look at working with the Attorney General and being able to have them involved from day one. And yes. then it gives us, Tracy, then it gives us the saying, okay, well, maybe the Attorney General's office is not really helping GPA out, because they have made great strides to involve the Attorney General's office. Yes. At every step of the way. Senator, and then that's when the legislature comes in.
Cooperation requires all parties to cooperate.
Absolutely.
And so GPA has not stopped trying.
Right. And I'd like to hear from the Attorney General's office as to why they are not being, such great partners with GPA on something as important as this. So I will reach out to the Attorney General and I will ask what is going on there. And but I really, truly believe we need those checks and balances. That's why these procurements are put in place. And I just don't want to see any kind of shenanigans going on. Be the watch eye. And I'm sure you don't either, Tracy. I know you're very, very studious at making sure the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, because you have a great reputation and you want to keep it that way.
Well, thank you, Senator. And speaking of dotted and checks and balances, I have Mary Ann Wolashuk here. She is our attorney, our staff attorney at GPA.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you so much, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to ask these questions and get to the bottom of some of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tiedemann. I'd just like to also recognize Senator Joanne Brown, who's joined us here today. Senator Quinata, you're recognized. Senator Joanne Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and certainly to the Guam Power Authority for being here. I understand the issues that have been brought forth, but I, like Senator Tello, have reservations when we're looking at changing the procurement process. And it's sounding as if GPA, you're not getting the response from the Attorney General's office that you'd like to have in a timely manner to move forward your procurement. But I don't think that the solution to that is simply to remove the Attorney General. I have to tell you, and I understand the issues with the Guam Power Authority and where you're at with the construction of the new power plant and the timing of everything that originally probably would have been in better place had we not had the typhoon that we encountered last year. But the challenge at our end, it's becoming a little concerning that we're seeing bill after bill after bill that's asking us to change or accommodate Guam Power Authority. That's not normal. That should not be the normal process of how we go through these issues. I did serve for a time as the oversight chair for GPA, and some of your key people, even on your board that are sitting there, were there when I was last, their oversight. So it's only on that basis. I understand the timing, I understand the challenges, I understand the infrastructure involved, the time it needs to get it in construction, the time it needs to get the supplies and materials that you need here. And again, the challenge of getting the power plant activated because of the delays that have been caused by the typhoon. But I'm just relaying that's my reservation. If we're simply saying we got to remove the Attorney General's review to facilitate it and we're authorizing it, is this going to be the process? That concerns me. I don't know, and maybe we'll find out from the Attorney General to provide input as to what the issues are. But they have their requirements also to make sure that the interest of the government is met, ultimately the interest of the public. So that's my only comment that I have. I do appreciate your advocacy because that's what you need to do. You're representing the interests and the timing and the concerns you have for the Guam Power Authority. So there's nothing to be held against you on that issue. But at the same time, I just want to ensure that there are reasons why the Attorney General, like him or not, why his office is in place to protect the interest of the government and ultimately the public interest. So that's my key reservation so far with regards to this bill. But thank you for coming and again advocating for the Guam Power Authority. With that, Madam Chair, I have no further comment.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Actually, I have a follow-up question for OPA. So Jarek, if you don't mind taking a seat at the table. Okay, so I guess I'm amenable to I guess fine-tuning it so that we're not just opening it up completely as far as exemptions. I think the lifting the stay has been very problematic, right? There are definitely ways to change the laws in general. I feel that that's something that my office is committed to addressing. But that's going to require a lot of research and development, I think, when it comes to a policy that I feel comfortable really kind of advocating for. So Jarek, I appreciate your being here, and I know you come with a lot of knowledge. So I guess, if we were to pass an amended bill, right, would this be a cause for protest? Because the rules have changed?
So I really didn't have any time to really fully review the bill, but my understanding is the issue is really with the stay. It does not hinder anyone from protesting. And so it doesn't alleviate that process. It's just a matter of the stay, as I've heard hearing the testimony today. So it doesn't alleviate the protest part. And just jumping back to, I know the critical procurement, I mean, when our office knows that it's a very important procurement, we do our best to expedite the procurement appeal process as best we can. But I think in the case of the last one that was with John, there was also sort of this kind of warning from the public auditor during the hearing, and that's the reason why we did allow GPA some time to go back and make an official decision, is that once we issue a decision, you know, even though we do our best to expedite the procurement appeal process and issue a decision, once it goes out, whether the appellant or the purchasing agency is satisfied with that decision, they still have the option to go to court. And that's where, in the last appeal, we said, you know, if we do hear this, we will, you know, we do issue a decision, the chances are it may get appealed to court. And therefore, it can take, the glide path took several years to get a decision. And so that's the other scenario, is that once a decision is issued from our office with regards to the appeal, the parties have, I believe, 15 days to appeal to the court, and then it's a matter of, you don't know when that will be resolved, and that will, of course, prolong the delay in the procurement.
Yeah, going back to the question, so let's say we pass this bill, it's just basically allowing GPA to lift the stay. Would that be a cause to then protest? That's what my concern is.
I don't believe I can answer that right now, but in my thinking, again, I'm not an attorney, but I don't feel comfortable answering that.
Something that we can, maybe the legal counsel, do you think that by changing, you know, this particular part, let's say we allow GPA to lift the stay, and, you know, there is a procurement already in place, would this then bring on an aggrieved party, potentially?
So, Senator, when there are emergency procurements, there still can be protests, and the parties can protest, but the procurement goes forward. There is no stay on the procurement. That's the important thing. If the senators pass a law that says that there is no stay, then that's the law. So there is no basis for a protest in that case. So all we're asking is that the procurement be allowed to go forward. We're not even asking that the Attorney General not be allowed to review. I think this may have been explained earlier, but before, the Attorney General used to appoint GPA's lawyer as a Special Assistant Attorney General, and then that is how the Attorney General performed review by in-house counsel at GPA. Now the Attorney General doesn't do that. So GPA has in-house counsel who cannot be used for that purpose.
So I don't know if we're skirting the answer to my question, but I'm just saying that, you know, you have a procurement in place. We're not stopping that procurement at all. But if we change the law at this point, I mean, is there repercussions? That's really what my question is. And would it then cause more problems than what, you know, we don't know per se there's going to be a protest or not, right? But now with passing a bill, now then this could provide more opportunities for a protest. So I don't want to have unintended consequences too. So that's what I wanted to get clarity on.
Can I just add, the one thing that I think for the stay, if you lift the stay, it does affect the remedy with regards to the decision. So, for example, if you lift the stay, the project goes through, the agreed party doesn't exactly have if they wanted the contract from the beginning, the contract has already performed, and so you've resolved that sort of remedy that they initially wanted when they appealed or protested. I think this was apparent with the recent DFS case, where that was just issued, I believe, last week, where this was a protest, an appeal that was years ago for the LOTE, and LOTE has been operating throughout this whole process, and now a decision was just issued, and in the decision they even talk about how the first finding was that it was timely, and so they had a valid point to protest, but now what remedy is given, that's the question next, is what remedy is going to be offered, and so that's the issue, that the stay, if you lift the stay, that the contract gets performed, therefore what remedy would an aggrieved party have in the end if they don't get that contract?
But Senator, I would add to what Jarek had said, we're not arguing about that. However, this is an emergency, and don't mean to throw any shade to LOTE or DFS, but this is to provide necessary power to the island. This is an emergency. So the automatic lift of stay is really should be applied to emergency procurements. Jarek, I'm not following the LOTE case, but I'm not sure if that was an emergency procurement.
Yeah, I mean, that brings up a point, because perhaps this could be, permanized when it comes to emergency procurements, rather than it being a one-time thing. So that's something to really investigate. But I appreciate, we'll definitely reach out to GPA to figure out any particular language to tighten it.
Senator,
Yes.
if I may be heard, you were asking if there could be a protest based on this law. The things that people protest in a procurement, they're saying that we didn't follow the law or we didn't follow the rules. If the law says what you say it says, and if we follow it, there's no basis for protest. As far as the Lottie case, I understand that was done as an emergency, but I think it had something to do with their luggage handling system. So, a different case. Okay, I understand. I do want to point out that even if the protest goes forward, the stay is lifted, there's an emergency, there is precedent for this. There was the Turfco case, in which the GSA prevailed, and then I think the protester appealed to the Superior Court, and I don't know what happened after that, but there's more remedies than just going out for bid again or redoing or giving them the contract. The protesters have other remedies that they can look to, so all is not lost if an emergency procurement goes forward, because this is a special circumstance. It's not something that comes up very often. Thank you.
Okay. Maybe another, I'll probably just reach out to you and work with you on this one. All right, so if there's any other testimonies, Senator Parkinson, you're recognized for closing.
Thank you. Thank you for GPA for coming in again to give your testimony. I appreciate you coming to defend your bills. I introduced bills 201, 206 at the behest of GPA with no changes in your work. I let that be 100% a work product of GPA because I have had many conversations with the people at GPA. As someone critical of GPA, as someone who's introduced legislation to disband the CCU and do all those fun things, I looked into your eyes and I looked into your hearts, and I saw that you guys, though we may disagree with some things, you're acting in good faith and you're trying to do what's best for the island. And so that's why I introduced your bills with no changes. I like the original bill that we put out, but I have to admit I am not an expert. So in terms of the amendments that you had put out, as a junior senator, I have to admit with great humility that I don't always know everything. But there are some very experienced and wonderful legislators in this body whose opinions I do greatly respect. And so if you can convince the procurement chair, the public safety chair, the speaker of the validity and the need for this, for these changes in the bill that you're requesting, I will support those amendments as well.
Thank you, Senator.
Really, at the end of the day, The fundamental question that divided this body regarding 201, and it was probably going to divide this body regarding 206, is have we, GPA, exhausted all of our options? You have made the positive case to me that you have, but ultimately that is the question that decides whether or not these two bills were passed. So I encourage you to continue reaching out to your senators and having these conversations and making your case, because if this is an emergency, you should treat it as such and make the case to every single senator out there. You have made your case to me, and I will support whatever bill comes out of Senator Sabina's committee, and I will push it to the best of my abilities. So good luck to you folks, and good luck to all of us.
Thank
With
you,
that, I
Senator.
yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. If there are no further testimonies or comments on Bill 206-37 LS, this bill is duly heard. The committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m. Thursday, February 22nd. Please address all testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning, which can be dropped off at the mailboxes here at the Guam Congress Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. I want to thank everyone who's come here today for your hard work and your presence and participation. Situas Masi. So we're going to move on to the last item of our agenda, which is to hear testimony on Bill 237-37 COR, sponsored by Senator Sabina Flores Perez. It's an act to add, sorry, this is incorrect. It's an act to amend Section 5150 of Subarticle F, Article 2, Chapter 5, Division 1, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to updating the duties of the Attorney General by increasing the threshold for procurement, oversight, and advisement to $1 million or more. Okay, so I'd just like to provide some brief opening remarks. So Bill 237-37 proposes to increase the threshold for AG review from $500,000 to $1 million to partly adjust for the reduced purchasing power due to cumulative inflation since 2010, when the threshold was at $500,000, and to alleviate potential bottlenecks that may impact the timelines of essential procurement. Based on our estimate, the cumulative inflation from 2010 would bring it up to $700,000. The rationale for the $1 million threshold was to adopt the same threshold that the PUC has for its utilities. Today, invitations were sent out to the Director of Administration, Edward Byrne, Acting Chief Procurement Officer, Andriana Kidigwa, Attorney General Douglas Moylan, Public Auditor, BJ Cruz, President Dr. Mary Akata of Guam Community College, Superintendent Kenneth Swanson of the Guam Department of Education. We have his representative, William.
James Stake on behalf of the Department of Education.
Thank you for correcting me. James Stake. Director Michelle Perez from Department of Integrated Services for Individuals with Disabilities. Fred Harecki, Administrative Law Judge from the PUC. General Manager John Beneventi of Guam Power Authority. Director Teresa Ariola of the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. Fiscal note was provided on February 9th. The comments, it states the comments from the Office of the Attorney General states that the proposed change in 5150 would be beneficial to both the Office of the Attorney General and the various Government of Guam agencies. BBMR states that the bill does not ascertain any immediate fiscal impact upon the revenues or expenditure of any funds of the Government of Guam. So at this time, we would like to invite those that have come to speak, and we have a public auditor. In his place, we have Jarek Hernandez. Jarek, thank you for being here, and you're recognized.
Thank you and good morning. The public auditor had to step out for another meeting. That's why he asked me to testify on behalf of the office. Hafaday Senator Perez and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on bill number 237-37. The Guam Office of Public Accountability does not oppose the bill, but also does not fully support it. We agree that adjusting the procurement process to factor inflation supports efficiency in our government, but we also must ensure full compliance with procurement rules and regulations by all agencies. The Attorney General's involvement and review of procurements with the award of $500,000 or more was introduced as a safeguard for ensuring compliance with procurement rules and regulations. However, we also understand and acknowledge that this additional requirement has affected the timeliness of certain procurements. Increasing the threshold may alleviate the bottleneck that occurs because of the additional review, but we also must acknowledge that it may also increase the risks of agency non-compliance with procurement rules and regulations, which is the main reason why the office does not fully support the bill. But we also must reemphasize that we do not oppose the bill. And should you have any questions, feel free to contact me at the office. Thank you.
Mrs. Masi, Jarek, I appreciate your testimony on behalf of the Public Auditor and OPA. So next on the list, we have, so we did receive written testimony from DOA, from Administrator Posadas from GMH, but then we also have Director, Administrator, Deputy Director, Fernando Esteves from GURA. Thank you for being here. You're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Honorable Senators, I'm Fernando Esteves, Deputy Director of the Guam Housing and Urban Renewal Authority. I am present today to testify in support of Bill 237-37, an act to increase the threshold of what has been colloquially dubbed the 5150. As you may be aware, the threshold of $500,000 as it exists today relative to Section 5150 was set in 2009. It is our belief that Bill 237-37 adequately accounts for the 15 years of inflation. Additionally, in July of 2010, Iles-Latern Guahan certified an emergency for Bill 434-30, which ultimately became Public Law 30-72. The public law allowed Special Assistant Attorneys General to conduct reviews of 5150 procurements, and it was recognized then, as it should be today, that balance is necessary. GURA recognizes and respects the authority and discretion of the Attorney General to designate or not to designate a SAG to represent the AG in his statutory obligations. However, the statutory and regulatory responsibilities of agencies to execute their duties remain the same. GURA is 100% federally funded. A significant portion of our funding have hard expenditure and not obligation deadlines. As it was recognized in the emergency certified in 2010, and as it exists today, necessary and undue delays on government procurement affect agencies' abilities to function. Additionally, if, as a matter of general government principles, consider any expenditure of government funds as to only be based on a matter of need, then by those same principles, every procurement activity matters. Similarly, subscribing to basic leadership principles, authority and responsibility are intrinsically tied. Section 5150 procurement should not be backlogged, and discretion of priority should remain with the organization ultimately responsible. It is GURA, not the Office of Attorney General, that has to answer to the people for federal funds returned or paid back to the federal government for incomplete projects. There is a general concern, recognizing human limitations, that the backlog of civil matters and the discretion of priority at the Office of Attorney General may affect the quality of advice, or the delays in review have negative consequences on agency operations. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony, and we request your support and favorable vote on Bill 237-37, subject to any questions.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Esteves, for being here. So, Attorney Stake, did you want to provide any comments on this bill, or any, in general comments?
Yes, thank you, Senators, for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Department of Education. I'm Attorney James Stake. I'm an attorney for. Generally speaking, we do support the increase of the threshold from 500,000 to $1 million. I believe this is an organic progression of the inflation. We have the federal simple acquisition threshold that increased from 125 to 250. And then also locally, the small purchase price has increased as well. I believe this is a natural progression as inflation keeps increasing anyway. So that's our general position. So we do support.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you, by the way.
Thank you. So I guess now it's time for questions. So I just, especially with Guam Department of Education, there has been a huge need for, and I'm glad, a huge need for procurement to be done, expeditiously. Can you probably tell us what the impact would be for GDOE?
Sure. So when it comes to construction or certain more complex service agreements, we go to the Attorney Generals for the review anyway. So it's not like the AG wouldn't be involved if it's under 1 million. They still get involved with construction or other more complex projects for Department of Education. I think that where this would help is, for example, when we're buying straight supplies and it's more hammers, more nails that don't necessarily need a contract, we wouldn't need to be in front of the AG for the AG Form 16. Madam Speaker, would be the new AG form where they're involved at every single level. So if we're buying, let's say, just straight supplies, this would help when the value is lower than 1 million.
Did you say there was no contract when you buy these supplies?
Well, purchase order for hammers and nails wouldn't need purchase order still would be a contract, but
Yes.
We still go to the AG if it's valued over 500,000, even if it is just buying hammers or just buying nails. They're still involved all the way through if it is over the threshold.
I was hoping you'd say you get the fencing done, the mold mitigation done. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Esteves, I know you, thank you for being here. Yeah, it is concerning that, you have to answer the federal government, and I don't know if you said in your testimony, but sometimes you have to give back the money, or what is the implications of?
So we don't have to give the money. We're not there yet, but we're close. I think there was a substantial change, and as I provided in my testimony, we fully recognize the authority and discretion of the Attorney General not to assign any SAGs. However, that sudden change to status quo operations had a negative impact. And I think our first experience was a procurement for drainage correction at one of our public housing sites sat for over 4 months. I think in good faith, we received a letter saying that there would be a 30 to 60 day turnaround. That was from the Assistant Attorney General. So we did in good faith submit a procurement, didn't get it back. And so, we're having to move forward, and a lot of those projects haven't been moved forward. So we're coming close to an expenditure deadline on many of them, or had to cancel out those projects and look at other projects that we could get done within timeliness. So we had to shift priorities. Though it wouldn't have been our first course of action, the drainage correction is obviously a very important one, but reshifting of funds and how we reprioritize projects wouldn't have been our first course of action, but out of necessity we've had to do that, and which is why I state in my testimony that we should be able to prioritize based on our agency mission as opposed to the discretion of priority that the AG may have on whether or not what he deems is more important procurement to review and send back to the agency.
I'm of like-minded with concerns that if there's a way we can streamline it at the AG's office. This is just one potential aspect, right? As far as basically, not having to go through the AG, but of course it's based on, and this is really critical. 4 months is a long time, and the ability to, and that could mean not meeting the deadlines. Or not getting the air conditions for, the classroom. And, it sets up a situation that we can avoid, I think. It could be avoided, and it's not necessary if we can only kind of speed things up. But again, I guess the capacity is an issue. Yeah, that's, I guess, the reason for this potential, this bill.
If I may, Madam Chair, I'd also like to mention, because the agencies have the legal responsibility, at least those that are able to in law, have our own legal counsel who has the ethical and legal obligation to advise. From an executive management point of view and just general professional experience, it's important to have your counsel close by, right? Especially if they're paid for and that's their responsibility. When I say a general concern is when there's a stack of procurements, of 5150 procurements, you don't know where your procurement is in terms of the priority, and you don't know the amount of diligence put into it, right? And also the nuance in terms of your particular procurement could be power generation and management. It could be housing, fair housing compliance, or other requirements to improve the health and safety of public housing. And it's having that built and generated expert knowledge in the agency that's important. Now, we don't oppose working with the Attorney General at all in any of the procurements, but it should be understood that where primary counsel is, and that regardless of position, we should all be working together, and we all have the interests of the people of Guam in our minds.
Okay, thank you. So I'm looking at DOA's testimony, and they actually recommend a higher threshold of $3 million. Maybe I can get your responses to that, Mr. Hernandez.
Well, our position is as long as there's a review, that's the first point, but obviously when you lift the threshold, you're also lifting the risk. So, yeah.
Fernando?
We would be supportive of that, but again, we don't have any objection to working with the Attorney General's office, but there is a lot of nuance with our procurement because we are federally funded. So, there'd be the expectation that there'd be expertise, particular expertise with the uniform guidance of 2 CFR 200 and all of the relative laws and regulations that apply to us when they review our procurements. So, we're happy to work with it. We're happy to be transparent. All of our procurements are on our website to include our policies. But anything to potentially streamline it would definitely be of a benefit so we can expend and potentially compete for more funds for the community.
Okay, Mr. Stake.
Sure, thank you. So the actual value or number, I think we would defer to the legislature. However, we do believe that this is organic and this is naturally flowing to an increase, but we would defer the actual value to the body.
Okay, Sizuz Masi. So I'm going to open it up to my colleagues for any questions. Speaker Terlahi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question to you is, and I'd like to ask the AG this also, how many of your over $500,000 procurements have been returned or rejected by the AG with corrections or suggestions or something?
As of the new Attorney General?
I don't know. Well, since the statute was put in place, so if you know that.
I can't speak historically, and I have to go back and pull that data. However, in the recent experience we had, once the SAG designation was removed and we submitted directly to the Attorney General's office, that we actually didn't get any feedback. We did not on a, full transparency, on a non-5150, a small procurement for professional services, specifically being legal counsel, there was just a clarification that we made, but that procurement went through successfully. Otherwise, no, we haven't had a return procurement on a 5150 yet.
All right, and have you missed any deadlines because of AG delayed review?
Not at this time, because we internally shifted projects and put other projects up front so that we can get them moving. Because we have not necessarily 100% spend, but for GURA, there are checkpoints on expenditures, so you have to meet certain threshold, 50%, 70%, et cetera, till you get to the full 100. So we've been able to move to meet those marks, but it's definitely not an efficient use of funds. And as I stated in my testimony, the discretion of priority should be at the agency level.
What kind of delay, or let's just say, what kind of timing have you seen for your the over 500?
So what we have documented with our submission date for one particular procurement, which was we say was the test, based on the letter, and then documented emails back and forth, or mainly one directional from our procurement division, has been, I believe off the top of my, over 4 months.
And that's just one case. What about the others?
Well, based on that, we didn't submit, and we learned from that and redirected funds and expenditures in other areas to move other procurements forward. We wanted to see how the situation was going to develop, whether the SAGs were going to come back, whether it be the additional hires to the civil division, whether there'd be communication from the Attorney General on how things would improve there, though it's been generally silent. And so we've just been moving forward with what we could, what projects we could.
All right, and what about at the DOE? How many returned or rejected or asked for correction?
Thank you. For us, a lot of the projects that were extremely urgent, they've been very accommodating and helping when it comes to for example, the air conditioning, and then we're attempting to get FBLG and the refurbishments off the ground. So with the emergency ones, they've been very accommodating and cooperative. And I have had a decade of experience with the procurement in terms of different administrations. So there have been times when there's been a disagreement between attorney to attorney. So, I mean, you can almost do a case by case. Sometimes it's 90 days, sometimes it's 5 months. But, you know, every administration's been different. But with, at least currently, they've been there for our emergency. They've been working with us, yes.
All right, well, that's good to hear. And he did say that publicly. He was going to do that. What about the regular ones, non-emergency? Do you have any?
I'm not sure right now, Madam Speaker.
Are you required to submit a checklist, or did they give you a checklist of things?
Right, I was speaking about that earlier. So it's AG Form 16 is the form that they're asking to be involved at every single phase. It's so it'd be pre-publication, and then even right before you open the bids, and then right after you open the bids, and then right at the end. So at this administration now, they're asking us to submit at each level to have them involved. So it is a little bit more hands-on, but because we've had an AG directly assigned, it's actually been kind of smooth.
All right, so you're saying that requires review by them at every step, not that they're there. Okay.
Right. So we submit, we aren't electronic yet, and I've been pushing for that, but we're trying to get to electronic. But they do ask for the packet at each stage, and it's not, I don't want to say that everyone's been smooth, but at least the emergency ones, they have been with us.
All right. Thank you. So I would like to ask the AG, I agree with the public auditor's testimony regarding risk. Of course, I'd like to see what risk have we faced, right? Like, so how many, since this law was put in place, have been returned or for correction by the AG? And so how many between 500,000 and 1 million now might this affect? That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony.
Masi Speaker. Senator Taitigui, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I had to kind of laugh with my friend here, you know, about your testimony from the OPA's office. I don't think I've ever seen something as we don't oppose the bill, but we also does not fully support the bill. So you technically got to take a stand, you know, and we look forward to hearing that confidence in the OP's office to give us a testimony, whether you support it or not, maybe making recommendations, you know.
I think from our perspective, the whole point is that we want to make sure there is some type of review, right? And so whether the threshold increases or decreases, there should be still a review.
Yeah, which means the Attorney General's office.
Well, or like the other, in GPA's case, they were suggesting their in-house counsel was
but that's like the fox watching the hen house. You can't be doing that. You have to have someone totally outside. Yeah, that's like the fox watching the hen house on that one. I mean, you get the same, your attorney for the agency that is utilizing these funds to the way they want and getting their attorney to approve it? No, that's where the shenanigans begin. So I think, but I look forward to a revised testimony from the OPA's office and making the recommendations on how to move forward, because I don't want to hinder, we do look at the inflationary, it definitely has grown, no doubt about it.
I think that's one of the questions that I was just thinking about was
Yeah.
the number of contracts. Like, how many contracts have 500 contracts versus million now? What is the
Is that
breakdown?
cumulative? Are you talking about cumulative within the year?
Yeah, like how much type of $500 contracts or more have we actually approved? I mean, that would be good data to look at and see.
Yeah, very good.
To really understand what is the total universe of potential
So it's not per
increase.
contract, it would be like a cumulative throughout the year, so.
Yeah, like how many
that
$500
agency-
contracts or whatnot or more have the agencies been issued?
Sorry, it is per contract. He's suggesting what I'm suggesting, that we get from the AG a number, or from the, we just do a survey and find out how many contracts are we talking about that this bill would affect. How many contracts are there between $500,000 and $1 million? Yeah.
Or make a recommendation that the agency can't go beyond, if it's a like several contracts, one for 200,000, then one for 100,000, and then actually at the end of the year, it accumulates, or not the end of the year, once it goes to, let's say, because of inflation, let's say it goes to $1 million. And then anything after that has to go through the Attorney General's office. So it would break down the contracts, you know what I mean? Instead of just saying that every $500,000 or $1 million contract, because the bill says 1 million, right? Every $1 million contract doesn't have to go through the Attorney General. But what if we do it like within a year, cumulative? So not just one each, so that you don't have that one agency constantly using, breaking down procurement so that they can get away with doing more than 1 million a year without the scrutiny of the Attorney General's office. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I'm confusing it, sorry.
No, I was just saying, to better give an understanding, it'd be good to know how many $500 or more contracts have we processed in the years. Has it increased? Has it decreased? That's
just to determine the amount.
Yes, the total.
Yeah, okay. And I'm
number of
talking,
contracts.
yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
And instead of looking at the inflationary cost, we look at that. But what I'm talking about is limiting the agency to a certain amount, that once you've gone over $1 million worth of, procurement that has not been scrutinized, anything after that within the year has to be, regardless if it's, 200,000 or 400,000 or 500,000. I don't know. It's just, it's being accountable for all this money. Like I said earlier, there's been enough corruption in this government, people getting contracts left and right, right under our noses that have not gone through any kind of procurement, or, it's questionable, very, very questionable. And this is the people's money. But when you go to GURA is using federal funds, and they're very strict. The federal government is very strict on how it's spent, what it's spent on, and the procurement. So why doesn't GURA just follow, which they have to follow already, the federal government procurement laws, instead of having to follow the GovGuam procurement laws? Because you have to do that anyways. You just have to go through another hurdle, while other agencies deal with general fund money and only go through one hurdle, and that is the government of Guam procurement law. But you, to have to go through two, it just hinders you. So what's the difference between your federal procurement process, which you have to follow, and the government of Guam?
Well, Senator, I can give you the highlights. There are many, and that is why we rebuilt in 2002. Starting in 2002, when I came on board, we rebuilt our procurement division and beefed it up, because it is very technical. There are times when local law precedes and supersedes. There are times, and the federal regulations defers to local laws, and there are other times that they don't apply at all, right? For issues of sole source procurement, the federal government's very clear. Prohibition against local preferences, the federal government's very clear. In some instances, particular acquisitions of of cameras and things like that, and we have to monitor all that on top of what HUD requires. And there's also, as mentioned by GDOE, the FAR and simple acquisition threshold. So we're still operating on small purchase in good faith at 25,000 for small purchases. So it's really trying to, it really is burdensome, but we want to, as we're still part of the government of Guam, and we still want to act in good faith, but not at the expense of expending these federal funds, because at some point, still consistent with 5 GCA Chapter 5, is the requirement to follow the directive or the rules of the funds. And so if the feds say, okay, hey, based on your annual action plan, this is the project that you're going to do, you have to do it, then, you know, I don't want to, I wouldn't be the preferred course of action. But if we were to just say, okay, well, based on this different section in 5 GCA Chapter 5, that says we have to follow the federal regulations and follow the programming of the money, that we need to move forward anyways. But we don't want to have that battle. We don't want to not be a team player. We want to support the promotion of transparency and always are seeking improvement on our operations. But we're just looking for balance, and that's what we're here for today. Just looking for balance to be able to move forward in most of our daily operations. And if we need to plan around taking a little more time on the biggest procurements that we have, we're fully open to that.
Well, thank you, Senator, and I appreciate it, former Senator. But I'm sorry, you're always a senator, but I really appreciate that. But I know it gets frustrating, especially for GORA. But really need to maybe, work with. There's another bill that was authored earlier and introduced public hearing for that. You might want to chime into the first bill that we talked about, the advisory committee, I think. Maybe you want to look into that, because I know you have a lot of great ideas, to put, especially you. So I appreciate you being here, Senator, and of course, DOE, thank you so much for being here and providing your input. And I'm looking forward to that revised.
I want to clarify what the position is that we agree that we support that an age review should happen, but it's the threshold that we're kind of leaving up to you as the legislator to decide what should the threshold be. And I think what I was pointing out to the speaker is that, to having that data as to know exactly what is the number of contracts that we have issued. Did it increase? Are we issuing more $1 million contracts now, or are we issuing more $3 million contracts? I think that will help us determine the threshold. But our position is we'd like the AG review. And so it's the threshold that, we're kind of, we don't really agree with that. Obviously when you increase the threshold, you increase the risk. Right. And so that's just our position.
Well, I'm looking forward to your findings after that and providing another testimony for the record so that we can have something in our hands to tell us what we should and should not do, that would help. Because you guys are the experts. You deal in procurement every single day. We have like gazillion of other things that we have to deal with every day from every agency under the sky, but procurement is your expertise, and how we can move forward on making something better to keeping that low risk and transparency all intact. But I hope to look at another testimony to help guide us as well. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Masi, Senator. Senator Quinata, you're recognized. Okay, Senator Brown.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I certainly understand the concerns that are being brought up by the agency. I mean, when you hear about issues, obviously, you hear a lot about procurement. But I think I'm sort of at a disadvantage in making a decision on this bill finally, because I don't have a representation from the Attorney General's office to be here. And I certainly hope we were able to get some feedback from his office, understanding, the amount of procurement that may be going through his office, the amount of staff capacity he may have, and what his position is with regards to increasing the amount from $500,000 to $1 million. So I appreciate the concerns you brought forth. I think that's something that we need to be mindful of. But I'd also like to see that we get feedback from the Attorney General of Guam, who is also elected to his capacity as we are, before we take action on this bill. With that, Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Great. Thank you, Senator Brown. Yeah, we'll definitely get a confirmation. You know, we did get the fiscal note that said they supported it, but we would definitely reach out to them in addition to seeking the further questions regarding the amount of procurement, whether it's increased within this range. But yeah, based on the inflation alone, you know, our calculations was 700,000. The reason why the bill states $1 million was because we wanted to put it in line with the PUC. So what this bill does, it basically allows governing boards still to oversee these procurements. So that provides an additional check in the system. It doesn't remove any checks, but there's still that checks in place. Yes, Mr.
Thank you. Just
Chavez.
want to add a little alibi, Madam Chair. So we calculated for the same thing based on the CPI, the mainland CPI, around 720,000. But considering Guam and what we've experienced here and the increased cost, we should probably consider that to be a higher amount. And I think that's why we support the 1 million as a baseline. The second part I'd like to request, based on what I'm understanding, is if there are numbers that are going to be provided showing historical data on the 5150 and how many procurements, I would also request that data be provided on turnaround time. Time is money, right? And especially now with inflation going up, the cost of construction and material going up, the competition against the federal government for the same materials that's building infrastructure on Guam, time is money. And so I believe that there should be consideration of the turnaround time overall. So I'd ask the senators to view that alongside.
Yeah, very much appreciated for all your testimony today. And so being that there's no further testimony, we will continue, this bill is duly heard, but we will continue to receive written testimony until February 22nd of 2024. Please address all testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning. It can be dropped off at the mailboxes here or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. We will now adjourn. The time is now 11:48 a.m. Mrs. Masi, have a great day.